This is an excerpt from Chapter 1 of the novel 1984 by George Orwell. This specific passage gives a brief view of the intensity in Orwell's writing to describe the setting and the atmosphere of the novel. The tone of the passage seems to be very emotional and imaginative to hook the readers. Orwell uses a lot of imagery and contradicting phrases to differentiate the totalitarian society described in the novel to one that is completely opposite. Orwell enhances the theme of power throughout the passage as he expresses certain ideologies that encounter the idea of living in discomfort, being watched at your every move. He also mentions how the party has too much control over their citizens. He mentions these traits using certain strategies such as imagery, irony, and repetition. So obviously we know, and it is very noticeable from the passage, that Winston works at the Ministry of Truth. It is obvious that he does not completely support the party, but he is put in a situation in which he cannot control his feelings and point of view, or else he would have to deal with such harsh consequences. A part of his struggle working at the Ministry of Truth is the fact that he knows information beyond what the party gives out to its citizens, and he is forced to forget them and not mention them. This shows how empowered the party is against its citizens. So from this passage we learn that, like, we get the vibe that Winston isn't completely supportive of the party and the rules and regulations that they give out and enforce on the communists. And we just know that throughout Winston's childhood he went through certain experiences about the background history of London, or like the setting he was in, the place. Yeah, and some of the important quotations in the passage where Winston kept his back turned to the telescreen. It was safer, though as he well knew, even a back can be revealing. So Orwell describes Winston as someone who basically is very like well grounded about his life and everything that he goes through. So he says that he feels safer when his back is turned to the telescreen, and the telescreen is the object they use to like look over the people and watch what they're doing and if they're being supportive of the party or against it, or especially those who try to rebel against the party. So he felt Winston felt safer when his back was turned to the telescreen. That way, he felt like they weren't really watching everything he was going through, and basically everything that is happening in his life, even though he was kind of put in a situation where he does not have another choice but to go through what he's going through. Also, the author describes the place, the community, as something that is very vague, distaste, something that is very disliked, or something that wasn't basically positive to the communists. And also, Winston wonders whether London was always like that. Through his childhood memory, he wonders whether London was always like that or it had changed. Another quotation is, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." These are contradicting ideas because we never really find peace in war, or freedom with slavery, or ignorance is strength. So like they're very contradicting ideas, which allow the readers to kind of have like to double think about these certain ideas, because the author is trying to show is trying to introduce the readers of what kind of society the party is, like what like how different it is from other societies and lives. Like, for example, people like us now in modern days don't see this place as something to be normal. Like, it's something out of our norm, something that we're not used to, something that is very new. So, like, these contradicting ideas, it also gives a sense of irony because they live in a war-like environment, and he's just describing war as something to be peaceful, and freedom as something to be slavery, and ignorance which is strength. But it's it's the opposite. And another quote is, they were the homes of the four ministries between which the entire apparatus of government was divided: the Ministry of Truth, which concerned itself with news, entertainment, education, and the fine arts; the Ministry of Peace, which concerned itself with war; the Ministry of Love, which maintained law and order; and the Ministry of Plenty, which was responsible for economic affairs. So each of these ministries basically are are in control of certain things that go on in the society. But even though it seems like it is organized, since it's divided, but it's not really organized, because like they have four different ministries that take care of four different things, like, which are kind of opposing. Because here it says the Ministry of Truth, which concerned itself with entertainment, education, and fine arts. Like, the Ministry of Truth first doesn't give out full information about everything, it just gives out the things that the party wants its communists to know. And then the Ministry of Peace, which concerned itself with war. Like, how can, as we said earlier, like, these are contradicting ideas. Like, how can peace and war be in the same phrase? But this also allows the reader to understand the difference between the society that the author is trying to describe and the society that they are surrounded around. Another quotation is, the Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. So even those even those heartfelt like scenes in the novel were described as something that was frightening. Like, how can love be frightening? Love is supposed to be something that, like, is pure and cures people and, like, make them happy. It shouldn't be something that is frightening. But he describes it as something that is frightening because people, like the communists, the people that live in this dystopian community, were not allowed to, like, engage themselves with these things that are for us considered natural. Like, we do go through these things, and we do go through certain things in life that, for example, like love, like everyone goes through that. And but in this type of community, people didn't have the freedom to, like, expose themselves to these things. They were, like, very conservative and to themselves. So to them, if they went through something like that, it was something that was so frightening because it was out of their norm and out of their control. They weren't allowed to engage themselves with people and women and men and so on. And about the stylistic features in the passage that were used, which is imagery, irony, and repetition. So there's a lot of imagery because at the beginning of this passage, the author uses so many words and phrases to describe what it was like to live in such a community. Like, all throughout the first part of the chapter, which this passage comes from, Orwell describes how the party is something that is so vague, something that is disliked, something that we as people would hate. And um, he uses imagery in this phrase in the passage, where there are always these vistas of rotting 19th century houses. 19th century houses existed like in this type of community. Their sides shored up with blocks of timber, their windows patched with cardboard, and their roofs with corrugated iron, their crazy garden walls sagging in all directions. So, this is all imagery. It allows the reader to imagine how the community looked like, as because he mentioned that it's very strict and so on. So the author wanted to give the readers a taste of what it was like to live in such a community. He uses irony in, as we mentioned, he uses irony in, like, especially when he says the Ministry of Peace was concerned itself with the war, and the Ministry of Love for Economic Affairs. Um, and the Ministry of Truth, and so on, and how he says the Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. Like, frightening and love don't really go together, so it's kind of ironic. And also, irony can happen in the statement that Orwell mentioned in the passage, which is war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Like, all these are so ironic to the readers, because they're contradicting ideas, as mentioned before. And repetition, because the author is always being repetitive about like the type of community that they're surrounded by, how and about how Winston isn't really like supportive, and just about the community in general. Like, he was very repetitive to make sure that the readers understand the type of community they are reading about. Like, for example, as a reader, if I were to read this passage, what I would understand about this community is it's not comfortable. You don't have freedom, and it's very warlike, and just discomfort in general. And yeah, so that's basically what the passage is talking about right here. And I really like think the word telescreen, like, since Orwell used the word telescreen in this passage, the word itself telescreen already describes the situation, like the entire situation of such a community, where people are being watched, people are living in discomfort, people are not having the freedom to engage themselves with things that they like to do, or things that they want to do, or things that they want to experience. And I feel like this passage just shows us how the communists have 0% control over the things they do, or the things that they want to do. And if they were to rebel, they would have really harsh consequences, as mentioned before, and they would be kicked out, and so many things would happen that people try to avoid. And that's basically